Wow. It's
Hi,
packed. It's packed.
It is packed.
I'll bet we're sold out online, too. Yeah. The link is full.
Right.
No one else can join the...
Hey, thanks for being here, everybody. This is really, really exciting. Awesome. We're really good at this. Can you tell?
We better be. We're 200 episodes deep.
So most of you guys know what this is about. We have the amazing, a huge chunk of the amazing creative team behind the #1 sci-fi rated show, Defiance. Yeah.
Would you guys like to just go down the line, introduce yourself, what you do for the show, on the show, and that way people will know the context of with which you speak?
Hi, I'm Kevin Murphy, and I co-created the show, and I'm executive producer, and I am the showrunner.
I'm Darren Swimmer. I'm a writer and an executive producer. And that's about it.
I'm Paul Leonard. I'm a co-executive producer. I'm responsible for post-production on the show, from editorial to visual effects and final sound mix.
My name is Brendan McCreary. I am the songwriter and song producer for the show, not to be confused with my big brother Bear, who does the score. Your collective sigh of disappointment, you can release that now. Just kidding.
And I'm AJ Meijer, recurring season 4, which hasn't aired yet. I'm kidding. I'm just planting seeds, guys, planting seeds.
Well played, man.
Thanks.
And I'm Trevor Algatt. So thank you guys for being here. We're super stoked to be doing this and to be sitting down with you guys, because this is an opportunity, I think, for all of us who maybe haven't had a ton of experience sort of in the inner workings of a TV show, to find out what it's like, to find out what the grind looks like, what the day-to-day looks like, especially from the perspective of a showrunner and post-production and composing and song producing and like all that stuff, all of that. And what's really interesting about this show too is that it's the first show, I think, to have a video game that's a massive multiplayer online, I think I said that right, game that sort of runs in tandem with it, and it actually can influence the storyline, if I'm not mistaken, and vice versa. Is that right?
That is true. That was part of the conception.
So epic, right? It's amazing. So very cool. So yeah, that's sort of the context of this whole night, is for us to take a closer look at what makes a TV show like this run.
We wanted to, what we usually do with all of our guests on the show is start at the beginning. But since the guest tonight is really your television show, we thought it'd be interesting to just hear how it came to be. What was the conception, how all the parts came together, and where the ideas germinated, and how it all got started.
Well, the show first came about because Sci-Fi, our network, made a deal with Tryon Worlds, which was an upstart video game company, and they knew that they wanted to make some sort of science fiction western. And it turned out that the domain name Defiance.com was available for purchase, so whatever the hell it was going to be named Defiance. They went through a steady stream of very talented writers, upon whose shoulders this lot stands, who came up with different ideas for the mythology. And what was interesting is this was all done concurrently with the video game creators. So as they were deciding what the alien races were going to look like and what would be cool games, there were Writers Guild writers who were coming in and pitching their ideas. And there's little fragments of all of those previous writers' mythologies. I was originally hired on the show as a consultant because I had come in halfway through the Battlestar Galactica prequel series, Caprica, and kind of helped get that house somewhat.
One clap.
Thank you. Somewhat back in order. So they wanted me to help the guy who Rockney O'Bannon, who had written the pilot script, a hand getting the show up and running. And I thought it was going to be a 6-week gig, 3 days a week, and here I am 4 years later. Long story short, there was a great deal of birthing pains because this being a cross pollination between a video game and a TV show, you still have to make a TV show, and there were a lot of questions about what exactly was the TV show going to be. And there were some people at the network that saw it as kind of a Blue Skies, Eureka-style science fiction Western procedural with a science fiction themed crime of the week. And Mark Stern, who is the president of the LA side of Sci-Fi, saw it more as a really tough, serialized character drama. And there was a lot of struggle in those early days trying to figure out what exactly the show was going to be. At one point, Rockne parted ways with the show, and the whole thing dumped in my lap. And ultimately, my requirement for staying on to take over the show was I had to figure out what my version of the show was. And so Mark Stern very bravely allowed me and the writing staff to put our heads together, and we completely revamped the pilot. We created new characters in Nolan and Orissa, who, if you've seen the show, are people you see on the poster. And we created a very, very different show, and we wrote that initial script in about a week. And all this was being done as we were casting, and we were working with the director who had been hired and the production designer, but nobody else had been hired, so we were figuring out where we were going to shoot the show. We were figuring out who was going to be designing the show, what the costumes were going to look like, what the aliens were going to look like. And while we were coordinating all of this, making sure it synced up with the needs of the video game. So it was a very crazy genesis for a television show. I've never been involved with anything quite so complicated.
It's a bit trial by fire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I add some color a bit?
I would love to hear from you, Paul, actually.
Oh, no.
because-
Kevin and I had the good fortune of meeting Kevin on Caprica, and I believe that the script was rewritten about a month before photography had to start, because we were backed into a launch date of not only the show premiering, but the game premiering a week before us. So there was a lot going on.
Wow.
No pressure.
Yeah, no pressure. I'm curious. There may be people who haven't seen the show or may not be terribly familiar with it. So right off, just before we kind of go any further, can you guys give a brief synopsis of the plot of the show? It's 35 years in the future, and there are aliens, and there's terraforming, and
You go.
I've done it before.
You've done it before, so you're probably. Well, how do I put it usually? It's 35 years in the future. It's after something called arcfall has occurred, and society as we know it has gone and been replaced with a civilization that is aliens and humans living together in something that resembles, I wouldn't say harmony, but they're living together peaceably. And it's a town in what used to be St. Louis that is struggling with all kinds of problems and obstacles from week to week.
And
You
one
can
of
elaborate.
And one of the things that makes the show a little unusual is that we're all used to seeing us versus them alien invasion dramas where it's War of the Worlds and it's humans are the good guys and the aliens are the bad guys. What makes the show kind of complicated and political and makes it a mirror of the American immigrant experience is the fact that there's 7 different races of aliens, many of whom despised each other, and for their mutual survival, they had to all work together to build these giant arcs to escape their system, which was being destroyed. And they took a 1,000-year journey to the planet Earth. And when they got here, they weren't quite expecting to find us. And so this is after there was a interplanetary war. Nobody won. This is what comes next. This is about the rebuilding of society. And you learn on the show that some of the races of aliens actually have a lot more in common with human beings than they do with each other.
see, that is so freaking cool. I love that stuff. You said it's kind of a mirror or reflection of the sort of immigration issues.
That's kind of what we were going for, because it was presented as a Western. So you have to figure out, how do you take aliens and a Western and kind of make them all fit together? And obviously it seems that what you had in the American West was a lot of land, and you had the Mexicans at war with the Comanche, at war with the Apache, the Chinese were coming in, everybody hated the Jews, and you had wars happening among people because people wanted land, people wanted resources, people wanted supremacy in this new land, and that's kind of what fueled the Wild West. And that's something that lends itself very well to the needs and the different customs of the various alien races who have brought a little bit of their home culture to this new world with them. Music, dress, cultural mores, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think it's really fascinating to sort of hear the show's having like roots being in that sort of world, or the very present world that we live in. And I'm wondering, like, what is there a thesis statement? If all art has a thesis statement, if it all is saying something about culture and society and the way we are to behave in order to survive together, what is this show saying? What is the sort of philosophical thrust of it, so to
We
speak?
flounder apart, we succeed together. That's the show.
Awesome. With aliens.
Don't forget
No,
about
I
the
love
aliens.
it. I
Don't
love it.
forget.
It's really, really cool.
I
And we're
also,
in space this year. And we're in space a little bit this year.
season 3, which just aired on June 12th, right?
We just premiered episode 4, premiered this past Friday. And I think you can catch up on it on Sci-Fi's website, and I know it's on iTunes, and you can probably get it on demand. I have no idea. I'm just talking out my
Plug
ass.
away, plug away.
Let's
Yeah, Google it. I do love this is kind of granular, especially this early on in the conversation. But I do love the authenticity with which you have approached the mythology, because I don't know how many fans of the show or people who know the show well enough to know that there's actually you've hired a linguist, and there are at least 4 that I know of alien languages, 2 of which are completely, like, you have a full-blown language that you can pull from. Poor Brendan has had to actually
I
translate
have intimate
pop
knowledge of
songs,
all these
yeah.
languages.
Translate pop songs, and like I said, it's a granular aspect of the show, but it speaks to the authenticity with which you guys are approaching the mythology. Was that always part of the plan, or is that something that you decided that if we're going to do this, we're going to do it right, kind of thing?
It quickly became part of the plan, because if you're going to do anything involving alien cultures, you have to have language that creates divisions. And when someone comes to the new world, they fall back on the languages of their old country. And to me, I found it very interesting that when Castathan, which is one of our races, when the parents were home, they would naturally lapse into the mother tongue. And their son, even though he was fluent in their language, he would prefer speaking in English. And occasionally you would have a scene where you'd have, a few lines of alien jibber jabber, and then someone would say, okay, we're in the new world, we need to be speaking English, which is sort of accepted as the common tongue in this world. Our languages were created by David Peterson, who is perhaps more famous for having created the languages on Game of Thrones. He created High Valyrian and the Dothraki language. And at the time, he had not yet created High Valyrian, just a couple of words. And Dothraki, because they were illiterate, there was no written version. So this was really exciting for David, because he was getting to do a written version of the language as well as an oral one. And we have true type fonts and everything. But you'll see, if you watch the show, and as part of the set design, that there's graffiti, there's signage, and it's all in the various alien languages. And we started off with just Arathian was our biggest language, because we used it the most. Castathan quickly caught up, and then we had Indigene, which they're the golf ball head aliens. And this year we have a new race we've introduced, which is a heretofore unheard of race called the Omek, and they have their own language. And David has based them in cultural customs, and I don't understand what it all is. They're like, I'll get an email from David out of the blue, and he'll go like, "Hey, is it okay that does it work in the mythology for there to be a red sky on the planet Irath in the old system?" I'm like, I don't know. Let's say yes. And he's great. That's perfect. That's perfect.
It's more of like an auburn color, actually. But.
Or we'll be writing, and we'll have a character name appear, and we're not linguists. We're just making shit up when we make up a character's name, and we'll get like an angry email from David. No, in the Arathian tongue, that is impossibly impossible. It has, and then he'll give us a list of 6 possible alternatives.
6.
He also
Get it right on your own show, Kevin.
David also is a very, very he's really into like games and odds and statistics, and he created our card game, which everyone plays in the bar, which is called Ivali, which is Castathan for colonization, which gives you an idea of what dicks the Castathan race are, because that's what they do for fun, is they pretend colonize the other worlds around them. And he created all of the cards and the artwork and all of the rules, and there's about 100 pages of rules for of all the possible card combinations. And each one of our alien languages, I have like a PDF that's about 150 pages with all the dictionary, with all the language, the lexicographies, the orthographic, is that what it is? Pronunciation guide and grammar guide and all of that for all of the languages, and it's insane nerdage. And I think he actually is he has a book coming out very soon about the Defiance language, the Game of Thrones languages, and there's like phrase books at the end. So I'm really excited to see it. But
Could I add one thing? Sorry, about or what I think is fun about David is he gives these little. It's like his judging on the performance of actors, based on their not on their acting, but on how well they say the language, and he'll be like, oh, so and so. Yeah, she did the language almost as well as a native speaker. And I'm like, how do you know what a native speaker sounds like?
He's hanging out with aliens when he's not hanging out with you guys.
It's amazing.
Well, he also saw he was watching dailies this season, and he called us to let us know that one of the actors was speaking gibberish. And I thought, well, they are speaking gibberish, just not your gibberish. But we did our best to straighten it out and loop it and put it in the correct
One of the more
alien language.
Yeah, one of the more fun parts of this job.
I think Brendan actually has practical experience having to not only speak the languages, but having to figure out how to sing and have
Indeed.
them like lay on a melody.
I don't even need, ordinarily, so when we're translating a song into one of the languages, I started back in season 1, and I became the full-time songwriter of season 2, and I remember in season 1 being so infuriated that I have to learn how to say all this stuff, and now I don't even listen to David's MP3s because he sends these enunciation and pronunciation MP3s.
Brendan, can you explain what we do with songs? Like what songs have to do with aliens?
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, that's an even longer point there. So. The world of Defiance is really unique in a lot of different ways, as we've clearly just talked about. But one of the things that makes the show also unique is the musical vernacular that's built into it. So obviously there's score, which my brother does, and each of these alien races has not just their own themes, but their specific instruments that we've either created or tailored to fit that race. And one of the things that makes the world so fascinating is how all these races of aliens and human beings have sort of created a popular musical world in and of itself. So Kevin is extremely passionate about music and songs, and I feel very fortunate that so many songs need to be in the show, and that's why I have a job. And so it takes place 35 years in the future in this post-apocalyptic world in which electricity is difficult to come by. A lot of the ways that, a lot of the recorded music is gone by the wayside. Like there's no more MP3s. There's, CDs and stuff, lasers, it's too complicated. So, vinyl is the primary way people listen to music. One of the main...
As it should be.
As it should be. As
Tell
it
us
should
how
be.
you really feel, Kevin.
And so a lot of times these alien races have sort of appropriated Earth music and mixed it with their own. And so very frequently I find myself having to concoct a song through not just in an alien language, but also having perceived it through what that particular alien who wrote the song in the show would have interpreted, it's like super meta, because I'm writing the song, but I'm actually writing a song that an alien wrote in the world, and how they would sort of mix, like, say, 90s Earth rock with what the instruments they might have used back home or whatever. So it's this incredible sort of mashup of all these different types of influences, both from our real world in reality and in the show and from these different aliens cultures. So I think I answered your question, but getting back to it, I started singing in Erathian, and then I had to start teaching singers how to sing in Erathian when they'd come to the studio and stuff. And now I don't even need to listen to David's samples. It's like I know it's Erathian, so I know how to do it, and I just sing it, and it sounds great. And then David always gives me good marks. I'm proud.
Now, Brendan, something I don't quite know is the lyrics sometimes for the original songs are written by Kevin and sometimes are written by you.
Correct.
But when David translates them, you have to figure out what meter to put the song in and how to make all
True.
those syllables fit into some kind of
True.
melody.
Yeah,
So there's like a negotiation sometimes. I'm copied on emails, and it's
Yeah.
like, oh, Brendan's on top of it. That's great.
Yeah, so the translations come in from David, and he puts in parentheses like which syllables we can sort of get rid of to fit in the meter. A lot of times, saying just a simple phrase in English turns into something extremely convoluted in Erathian or Castathin or Indogene or Olmec, and I'll do my best. A lot of times I just willy-nilly just pull out syllables until they sound good. And I'll even send David an email, be like, hey, I had to sort of fudge it. And he's just usually so excited to hear his language in song that he doesn't care. So I get off like with this gold card every time because, I pronounce it good. And even though I just take stuff out, he's like, oh, it sounds so cool in a song. The biggest success, this experiment, not success necessarily this season, I really wanted to do a rap song in season 2, and I didn't get to pull it off. And then in season 3, in episode 1, the scene where the lady's like powering the turntable on the bicycle, we decided to do an Erathian hip hop song, which was awesome.
Epic.
So where's the
I don't even know how to
There is a season 2
Season
soundtrack.
2 is available
Yeah.
right now on Amazon, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you want to listen. It's called Songs of Defiance Season 2. It's 22 songs. I either wrote them or produced almost all of them. There's only one song on there that I didn't have my fingers in the pie. It's really awesome. You should check it out. I'd really appreciate it.
Is the one we were talking about earlier on that CD? So this is one of my favorite stories.
Yes, it is.
Dead Girl
From Heather-
Walking?
Yeah, so for longtime listeners of the show, know the reason that I know Mr. Murphy here is because we spent a lot of time in a theater together in New York working on Heathers the Musical. Oh, come on, that can't get a bigger applause. They can't get a bigger applause than Caprica. Come on. There's like one person in the back, Caprica! Heathers the Musical, everybody claps. That's hilarious. So one of the fan favorite songs from the show, probably one of the best songs from the show, is this song called "Dead Girl Walking," and it must be in season 2. In season 2, they had one of the aliens sing it and therefore translated it into Erathian. So Larry O'Keefe actually came in and worked with. We were just talking about this in Holding because I got a chance to meet Brennan after hearing. You, I think, played us the dailies or something in the rehearsal room or something at one point.
Yeah. What happened is we were actually in the process of doing post-production on. Actually, no, we were still shooting season 2 while we were going through the whole Heathers experience. So I was splitting my time between the TV show and the stage show. And just because I had Heathers on the brain, I just started packing all of these Heathers the Musical things into the TV show. So if you actually watch season 2, you'll notice that every now and then there's a quote from the original Heathers movie as an Easter egg. If you watch with a freeze frame, you will occasionally see the key art for the Heathers Musical will appear in visual
In
effects.
every single shot.
Yeah, all
every
over the
single
place.
one.
It's like a fantastic drinking game.
It's on billboards of like broken down movie theaters and that kind of thing.
And then the other thing we did was we took one of the songs and we decided to have a grand experiment of having Brendan cover it for us. And he covered it in Erathian. And the idea here was that Algatt, who is our disc jockey, who has up until last week, from the top of the Archie broadcast.
Spoiler.
Spoiler alert. He would find old songs and he would re-record them and he would press his own records. So there's this very lively independent music scene in Defiance, and because these people don't have any cultural context for a song, and for them Lady Gaga can sound as profound as Leonard Cohen. And a Broadway musical doesn't really mean anything because there are no Broadway theaters anymore. So people are so the alien cultures are just listening to the rhythm. They're listening to the lyrics and what responds to them. And there was the girl who, that was her favorite song, who was the lady disc jockey, she doesn't really understand any of the stuff in the lyrics, but she understands, I'm a dead girl walking. Yeah, that's kind of fierce and badass. I like that. And she responded to that as an alien, with no awareness that anyone who was cool would probably not be listening to a show tune.
Show tunes are awesome, Kevin.
Hey,
So we handed our Broadway version sheet music to Brendan and said, okay, make something cool and awesome and badass out of it.
And we did, and it was easily the most difficult song of the entire season 2 soundtrack. Both to kind of absorb, retranslate, both in language and because it's a show tune. It's got the horns and the orchestra and the singing and and then I sort of devolved it into this like electro pop, really like hard, aggressive like electro thing, and it was the whole tune. It was like all 5. It's like a 4.5 minute.
The whole thing.
Yeah, and it was extremely challenging. And usually, especially on an original tune, I'll try to make it easy on David, have lots of like repeat lyrics and stuff so he doesn't have to translate. This is just like 3 pages of lyrics, all of which was translated. My poor singer, who handled it so amazingly, she came in really prepared. I'd sent her all the MP3s and stuff, but she had her work cut out for her. We were there for like hours and hours just getting the pronunciations correct and stuff. But it turned out great. It's like track 8 on the record.
okay, so it is on there.
It is, absolutely.
There it is.
Yeah, it's on there. So that you can go, if you've got Spotify, you can listen to both songs back to back for free and hear the difference. The one, the Heather's Cast album is on Spotify. Some of the tracks, and so is the songs of Defiance.
Jeez. I mean, I got to say, I've seen the show, and I've always sort of loved that the languages are so full, but I never thought about how much freaking work goes into all this stuff. And when I heard the songs like in the bar and stuff, I'm like, oh, that's cool. The song is in one of the language. That's really cool. Never thought more about it more than that. Just to hear that there's this much attention to detail that goes into it, and this much sort of energy. That's so cool.
Yeah.
I just think it's amazing. Wow. All right. I just had a moment. Cool. So I want to. I don't know. Anything else you want to talk about on the music front?
I was not expecting that rabbit hole to go so deep, so
I know. Like seriously.
that was amazing.
I want to kind of shift the gears to the writing a little bit, because I imagine with a show like this, so much of it is just like you said, like, oh, well, what if the sky was red? Cool. But also, I imagine that there's a lot of sort of, there's got to be like a very strict set of historical rules within the sort of worlds that you adhere to, and I'm sure that even within that, there are storytelling mechanisms that you employ, or maybe not, to loop the audience into the world. So I guess my question is, what is the process like when you start brainstorming a season and when you get down to the nitty-gritty of the plot lines and things? Can you tell us a little bit about like how you approach it from the sort of 30,000-foot view down to the more day-to-day stuff?
Sure, I'll start and then I'll hand off to you. Let me take, for example, the season that we're in right now, season 3. At the end of season 2, we aired our episodes, and we were invited, if we wanted a season 3, we had to give some indication of what that season 3 would entail. So I got kind of a skeleton crew of my writers and our writer's assistant, which included Darren, and I very generously bought everyone pizza. And we hung out for a day, and we just did kind of like a writer's camp in my living room, where we talked about what would we like to see, and we talked about the new race of aliens, and we talked just very, very broad strokes about what we would do. We had the idea, well, let's do something really big, and we talked about, we killed off a whole passel of major characters in the season premiere this year, and that's where that idea originated, and just kind of talked about what we think would be cool, and kind of what would be the first thing that would happen, what would be like 2 or 3 interesting touchstones in the middle, and then where it would end up. And then we wrote that up, and I went in and I pitched it to Sci-Fi, and hooray, they picked up the show. So then we assembled a writing staff. We brought back many of our writers from the previous season. We brought in some new writers, and the world was open before us and the writer's room open. Why don't you kind of walk us through day one of the writer's room?
Well, the first few weeks are they're in a way they're daunting, but I think for me they're my favorite part of the process because we get to do the blue sky, what we call the blue skies. The sky is blue. We can come up with all kinds of crazy ideas, and all of those are valid for at least a couple days until they don't work at all. And there's I don't know, what is like 2-3 weeks, and we'll plot out a whole season arc, and usually there's a little bit of that what we'd come up with left throughout the season, but it will change, and we know it's going to change. But we will continually sort of put little, cards or Post-it notes that have become really rare, because I don't know why 3M decided not to make them anymore. But these big Post-it notes, we put them up on the wall, and they get replaced and replaced and replaced until we have sort of a whole season. And we will change our minds, and we'll, sometimes Kevin will go off and do something else, related to the show, and the writers just sort of go down a path and bring Kevin in, and he'll say, yeah, well, what about this? And it usually is incredibly fruitful because we have all these returning writers mixed in with a couple of new writers, and it's a fertile period, and I just find that so much gets done in that period of time, and the creation of the new characters of the season. There's a character this season named Ram Tak, I'm just remembering how he came about in that period of time. And
Played by the amazing Lee Turgeson.
Yeah.
Tobias Beecher Nas.
And a
It's my
couple
Caprica friend.
and a couple new aliens with funny names. But yeah, so in that period of time, we'll come up with what will be then a presentation for the network. And
What we're basically doing on the wall is, if you can imagine, I'm going to try doing this right to left so it's the right for you guys. 13 columns for 13 episodes, each is an episode number, and then vertically, each major character's name. And then that creates a grid. And then in each grid, we try to figure out, okay, we know that Nolan, our hero, is going to leave town to go buy, I don't want to do any spoilers, leave town to go buy groceries. Yeah, that should happen in episode 7. Okay. And this character is going to pull a hangnail out. So that sounds like something for episode 3. So, and that's going to affect her husband because he's going to help her pull the hangnail out. So, okay, so that's what he's doing in that episode. And then over time, you're like, you know what? No, we got to shop for groceries much earlier. That's episode 5. And so as you come up with new ideas, the reason you do it on cards and Post-its is because your thing that's on the wall becomes a living document. And it becomes sort of like a tactile Excel sheet. And over time, you slowly begin to understand what the shape of the season is and what everybody's arc is character-wise and how the various characters intersect with each other. And then it comes time for the pitch. And that's where Darren and his partner, Todd, who is a crazy pitch monster, comes in.
yeah, so and during this period of time, it's an interesting blend because we'll have what we feel are the sort of emotional through points and the maturity of the show and how the characters are changing. But then there's also what are the needs of the network? What are they looking for? And of course, those are important to us. And so there's all these different facets that are coming into play. And we will then pitch to the network and get their feedback. And then, of course, there's this little thing called budget that you have to kind of work around a little bit, and then you go off and start writing scripts, and from that point it becomes sort of a week-to-week process of breaking stories, coming up with plot ideas, then going more and more granular. Bringing Kevin in, seeing what his opinions are of them. Kevin will come in and he'll go really granular with his opinions or go really broad with his opinions, and the group of writers in the writing room, in the writers' room, will continue to plug away till we send a writer out on an outline or a script, and we just continue to do that 12 or 13 more times, and you have a season.
Yeah, well, one of the things, just in terms of like how my job differs from Darren's job, even though obviously there's gigantic intersection, is I'm directly responsible for many moving parts. So during this period of time, I'm kind of rabbiting in and out of the writer's room, and Todd and Darren are a constant presence, and they're running the writer's room because I'm dealing with casting, I'm dealing with working on a pitch, I'm dealing with I'm dealing with various network needs, I'm dealing with what's going on with set design, I'm dealing with costumes, I'm dealing with all kinds of, and once we get actually shooting, I'm dealing with production rewrites, I'm dealing with there's an emergency on set, an actor doesn't want to say their lines, I'm dealing with
Who was that?
You can imagine.
I'm dealing with going into cuts. I'm dealing with, we just got network notes on this. Okay, well, let me have a conversation with this, that, and the other thing, because the weird thing about being a showrunner is you usually get it by being a writer, and you kind of sit around in your underpants at home and you write your dream script, and somebody says, okay, we're going to make the script because we think you're such a great person who sits around in their underwear and writes. And they say, and your reward for being so good at what you do is we're going to give you a totally different job. We're going to make you the CEO of a small business that has a $2 million weekly cash flow, and you're going to have to hire people and fire people and charm people and politic people and do all these things that nobody who sits in their underwear in front of their computer is really emotionally equipped
Qualified.
to do often. And good luck to you. And by the way, you're on the air in 4 months. So that's kind of what my job is, and the job for Darren and Todd is to get the best work out of the writers and maintain a constant presence. And when we hear from the network, all right, let's talk to the network, and they just got their testing in, and you know how they said 3 weeks ago that they want to really do more female-driven stories. Well, the testing says they want more shooting and Nolan punching people in the face, so it needs to be more male-oriented. Okay, fine, let's do that.
No one punches a person in the face.
And then all the cards change.
And you're there for just as long as you were when you put the cards there in the first place. There's a documentary I watched recently on Netflix called Showrunner. Have you seen it?
I have not.
You should watch it.
But I don't get outlined.
You can sit in your underwear in front of your TV
There you go.
and watch it. If you haven't seen it, you should. It's really fascinating, and I made sure to watch it before doing this because I wanted some inkling of what you do on a day-to-day basis, and it sounds as terrifying as you described it, so good on you. You brought up the big bad P word of pitch, and we did have a couple of questions come in on our Twitter or Facebook a couple of days ago. Someone, one person in particular, Michael, asked, what do you need? Now, you guys are pitching mid-show. It's not like you're pitching an original idea. At this point, you're pitching a new season or you're pitching an episode to the network. But since you're obviously good at it, people are paying you to make the things that you're pitching. He asked, what do you need? What is basically the tips of going into a pitch room, and what's the network looking for other than in addition to the idea itself?
I mean, I think there's many different ways to answer that question. I would say the most important thing is a pitch is a form of communication when you really boil it down to its essence. And I think that your job is to make the people who are potential buyers for your idea, make them understand why this is an idea that is worth putting time, money, and resources into. And that might be because you've got this one amazing character that you need to talk about. It's because, she's a girl and her name is Ally McBeal, and you've never met a girl like this before, blah, 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 blah. And then, then there's some lawyer shit that happens. That's one way of pitching. Or it may be, this is about a family, and this is about and they're in the mob, but the rise and fall of their family roughly parallels the immigrant experience in America, and they're called the Corleones. And it's all about the patriarch. And then as we move into later in the story, we go back in time and we meet the patriarch who was our hero in the first movie. He becomes a young man, and we learn more about who made him what he is. But we then watch what becomes of his son, and it becomes about sort of the macro big picture, and it's not one central character. It could be, yeah, we're doing Firefly, and it's going to be a reimagining of the classic Western, and we're gonna have like cool Western music, and there's a great thing of style and bringing the fun back into science fiction. It's whatever the essence is of the show that you're doing, that's what you have to convey. And I think as the pitcher, my advice would be, think about what's really special about your idea and lead with that, because that's the thing that they want to hear. And I think that it's not true that there's one template that works for all pitches, because I think every show is different and unique and special, and the way you pitch it needs to be adjusted accordingly.
If I could add one thing to that. My writing partner is a really fantastic pitch man.
He's a freak of nature. He's awesome.
So it frees me up to not have to do quite as much pitching, but one thing that he's really good at, and I think when I hear pitches, it's the first thing that I look for in somebody is you have to have passion for what you're pitching. And false passion is actually the worst thing in the world, because it's like salesmanship. But you have to believe this is, when Todd is pitching an episode of Defiance, it's episode 7 of Defiance, while he's pitching it, believes it's the best episode of Defiance we've ever written. And that's coming across to the person hearing it. So it's in the inflection of the voice, it's in the way he's looking at the person, or talking to them on speakerphone or whatever. So whatever you can do to just bring that to the room when you're pitching, I think is really important.
Wow, yeah. And
False passion equals salesmanship. Is that a knowledge bomb?
Maybe worded a little differently.
That's what he said.
Right,
Or
no,
did I mess it up?
I don't know. I wasn't listening. No, it's on the concept of pitching. A question that we talked about beforehand a week or two ago was, we've got all this content now coming up from Yahoo Screen and Hulu and Amazon and Netflix, and in those spaces, the people that we've talked to, even on the podcast, have said that they experience a lot more sort of creative freedom when it comes to crafting their pitches, when it comes to how much control they have over their show and things like that. And we both were kind of wondering, without incriminating anybody, what is your experience working with a major network like Sci-Fi in where you can go with the themes and whatnot in the show? Have you ever had to curb anything? Or are you pushed in a certain direction? Does that ever happen?
I also have a part B to that, which is how would the show be different if you were on like an NBC or a CBS or a ABC?
Yeah.
What decisions can and can't you make because of where you're at?
Basic cable is a lovely place to be. Very often, not as many people watch your television show as a few years ago. I worked on Desperate Housewives, and a great deal of people watched that show, but there was a lot more input from the network and the studio and from the larger corporate structures. And when we would do things that would be a little on edge, like having Bree's son Andrew smoke marijuana, there was a lot of back and forth about, okay, well, can we ever see him inhale? Can we see him exhale? Can we have a shot of the joint in the dish? And it was very exhausting, and it's part of the process because enough people are watching that show. It was a huge asset to ABC Studios and to Disney, television as a whole. So yes, because a lot of people are watching it, you've got a lot of restrictions and a lot of things. I'm sure that when everything that's going on in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I'm sure there's a lot of restrictions and red flags and places you can and cannot go, and that's because it's very, very popular. On a basic cable show, and I'll just talk about our shows. It's a lot. it's more people in this room. A lot of people watch the show, but it's not, by network standards, not a lot of people watch the show. So that means if we want to do something that's edgy or that really is sort of like pushing a boundary, then it becomes a conversation about, well, if you're going to do that, you're going to have to take a minute of running time out because we're going to have to make it TV MA instead of TV 14, and we're obligated by network policy to have a 5-second advisory warning, before every commercial break. And we're like, all right, I can do that. That's fine. So you do have a lot more freedom, and I think that certainly on a network like Sci-Fi, they want to be noticed. They want to attract attention. They want to make noise. So when you do things that would be crazy or maybe like a third rail on any other show, Sci-Fi gets up and cheers. When you want to kill a major character, they're like, yeah, bring it on. Who else can you kill? We love this
Americans.
shit. A bunch of bloodthirsty bastards.
Why
Paul,
did you just look at Paul for so long?
I was looking at Paul. You can't see me.
I feel
but I was-
Bloodthirsty bastard.
Did you get any, thing in post where you feel
Well,
like you-
Standards and Practice sees a cut of the show, and they send Kevin and I emails about, first they read the script and flag some language that they may want to filtered a bit. Or
Mostly
they'll see a
Erathian,
cut.
right?
They'll see a cut, and sometimes we have to paint some things out, things like that.
We also on this show occasionally we will do absolutely filthy, filthy, filthy. You could never kiss your mother with your mouth again language, but we put it into one of the alien tongues,
I knew it.
and we just don't translate it.
Brilliant.
So the actor acts it, and you get all the wonderful passion of it, and then we on social media we tell everyone what they were really saying.
That's epic. Brilliant.
I don't know why that more than anything tonight has inspired me to write something.
Yeah.
You just like rail against something I'm really upset about, but no one will know.
I know. Afterwards, I'm going to be like, so how do you say in Erathian? Next jerk I come across is going to get an earful of
That's
Erathian.
hilarious.
Go for it.
Oh, yes.
No, let it rip.
Promise?
Yeah.
I did, since we were just talking to Paul, I wanted to bring up something that we actually talked about with regards to post, because you're one of the EPs, but your focus is mostly on the post-production. Like, I think Kevin called you the post-production,
Yeah,
the
no,
Lord
it-
of post-production.
The Jesus of post.
There you go, the Jesus of post on Defiance.
That's what he asked us to call him.
Oh, come on.
It's in his contract.
That's why you're wearing that robe when you came in.
Yeah, right. Kevin has been very generous with this title of co-executive producer. I've been freelance post-production, unbelievably, on Sci-Fi Channel product for 20 years.
Wow.
Chiefly among them.
Sorry.
Yeah. No. It's, I stayed too long on sliders, and I became the hour-long visual effects guy. And I've had a couple opportunities to leave, and the truth is it's kind of a devil-you-know scenario. People have circulated around me at the network for a long time, and they trust me to get the job done, and sometimes they deploy me to difficult shows that are up against really intense air dates. But in this particular case, I was eager to work with Kevin again. Battlestar Galactica I worked on for 5 years, plus Blood and Chrome. And Kevin, what's unusual about post on this show is that Kevin's very democratic. He has this boyish enthusiasm, which I think you picked up on. And he's open to suggestions and better ideas. So you might find yourself in post with an episode that has 5 to 12 or 13 minutes too many in it. And as far as eliminating and consolidating ideas, and sometimes there's a scene that might work better in another episode, or you get into a green screen sequence with the virtual set. We're going through this on our finale for season 3. It's like, what's happening in this room? What should happen in this room? What's smarter that could happen in this room? So there's a lot. There's an opportunity for some rewriting. And I'm not necessarily the most vocal in that arena by a far measure, but we encourage people to talk and come up with ideas. And either Kevin embraces it or he feels challenged and it forces him to come up with something better or defend his position. But it's very organic all the way through the mix and the final delivery of the show.
That's awesome. The thing that we were curious about also is, well, you've worked on a lot of sci-fi shows, and sci-fi shows, obviously, science fiction shows in general, not just shows on the Sci-Fi Network. offer up a challenge when it comes to post, because you're usually making aliens or spaceships or, you know, the things, the terraforming that you see on Defiance. The thing that struck me about Defiance that I wanted to ask you about was, because it takes place 35 years in the future, but sort of the Earth ends in like 2013, it's a sci-fi show that almost is a period piece. And usually a period piece, whether it's a film or a television show, first of all, increases the budget immensely. Second of all, is very challenging to make happen. So from your point of view, having worked on all these various science fiction shows, what specific challenges does that actually present? The fact that you have, you know, these futuristic elements of the alien races and their technology and all of that, but also pushing the pause button on a war-torn, you know, 2013 United States.
Well, one of the most fun steps in the process of getting a show completed is sound and music spotting, where we get Brendan and Bear and the music editor and our sound editorial crew from Anifex, and we all sit in a room and spend 2 to 3 hours per episode watching a locked picture and discussing ideas about that kind of thing. You know, what kind of textures can we layer in the background? What can we comment on? You know, what can we do with the music or an environment or something that distinguishes it, and again, really gets granular about the detail and the origins of this world. So it's, again, I'm happy to play host and referee at times, but it's a very big canvas that we find opportunities to constantly explore, and there's a lot of folks involved.
We also do a similar, we do that with music and sound spotting. We also do a very similar meeting for visual effects spotting, where we look at the amount of visual effects that we originally committed to back when we were producing the episode. Then we look at the monstrosity that's been unleashed as we've been doing our various cuts of the episode, and then we figure out, okay, how are we actually going to accomplish this? And for our virtual sets, it's the actors are, you know, as Paul said, are kind of running around in green, and the universe around them could be almost anything. And the question is, what do we really want that to look like? And that becomes part, you know, that becomes an artistic statement that's made by the visual effects team. Moving backwards to production, similar things are happening when we have an actual a terrestrial set. Those are being designed and those are being color coordinated with everybody's costume, and everyone is working on what is the look of the town. And part of the great thing about that makes it feel like a period piece is the fact that there's a lot of junk in Defiance. It's a lot of stuff that used to be useful in our world, and now it's been repurposed as something completely different. Like one of my favorite things on our set, which is this huge backlot about the size of a football field in Toronto where we shoot, is someone took half a cab from a big 18-wheel rig, a truck, and they took it on a crane and they mounted the front of this truck on the second floor of a building and turned it into a little like coffee nook where whoever lives in the house can kind of sit there at the dashboard of the big rig with their, you know, teacup and look out on, with a great view of the town, and that's kind of like their awesome penthouse apartment. And there's no explanation how that got there, but the fact that that damn truck is there is why this is like my favorite set on any show I've ever done.
I do want to comment a little bit on visual effects, and that we have kind of an embarrassment of riches. Gary Hutzel and Mike Gibson run an in-house visual effects department. That it's a team that they pulled together season 2 of Battlestar. And right now, I believe we have about 34 artists working to 7 days a week to get the show finished this season and get episode 13 on the air when it's supposed to air. And there's a lot of invention there. So it starts again with scripted ideas and production design sketches, and it turns into this longer dialogue about visual effects and what should go in the show. And then Gary, the supervisor, takes those marching orders back to his artist. And the reason that every year people drop their jobs and come back to work for Gary is that they all get into it. They all, you know, bring in their own ideas and said, well, hey boss, what if we did this instead? So Gary might bring a slightly tweaked version of an idea back to Kevin and myself and say, what about this instead? And so there's a lot of passionate artists who are kind of looking to up their game and again explore the world. So it's really cool, and that turns into sometimes battle scenes with machines that we couldn't have imagined or engineered, but an artist took the time perhaps on the weekends to design some kind of walking tank machine that looks so badass. And again, if it weren't Kevin, it might be a writer who's a little more dogmatic and say, no, that's not what we considered when we wrote the script. Kevin's like, cool, more great shit for my show. So it brings out enthusiasm from everybody.
I love that. It was so cool to me, too, is just to hear how much it boils down to the people you work with. And each person being counted on to express their own individual creativity and bring their original ideas to the table and just play, just kind of like improvise and see what's going to come up. And on that note, the kind of final question I wanted to ask before I think we turn it over to some listener questions or some viewer audience listener questions. Sorry, got in autopilot there. Is what do you guys value in the actors that you work with? I imagine that there are some horror stories, but there's also probably some like, oh God, every time we need a difficult job done, that is the person we go to. So what are some of the common themes that you find are among the really wonderful people?
The actors who prosper on this show, and by prosper I mean end up having more and better material written for them because we get great results when we do it, are the crazy artists and the incredible workhorses, the people who have such artistry that it translates not into being about themselves, but it's about having the work done. The artists who come in and they spend the extra 4 or 5 hours a week it takes to memorize all of their lines in an alien made-up language. The people who are sufficient artists to come in at 3 a.m. and get caked into latex and to have to stand there and get their most intimate places, shaved and plucked as they're having like white makeup put put on them by like 3 different people at once at different parts of their bodies, and they do it because they want it to look really, really good. And those people have, the people who go out, the actors who go out and sit in the snow. In our premiere, Stephanie Leonard and Grant Boulder, who are two of our on the poster there. It was one of the coldest, snowiest, most miserable days in Toronto. It was our first day of shooting. It was the day after the Super Bowl, and in Toronto they had what they were calling the Super Bowl storm. And we shot in this raging, insane blizzard, and our entire crew was freezing. I showed up on set in my warmest jacket that I have here, and immediately they went, "Oh, you're underdressed," and they like held me down and like put a big monster, comedy South Park parka on me. And I watched Grant and Stephanie having to lie in the snow, and in the scene, they basically had been knocked unconscious, and they were left in the snow to die. And so they're sitting there. Not only are they lying in the snow with costumes that are like water resistant, not actually waterproof. It was okay the first time, but once they warmed, then everything was wet. Then they had to lie there in the snow quietly while the greens crew came in and took big milk crates full of snow and dumped the snow on top of them. And as they were doing this, you can hear on their mics, you can hear Grant Bowler and Stephanie going like, oh, fuck you all. I hope you all die of herpes. Oh, Jesus. And then, okay, rolling, and then they go dead still. Action. They sit there. And Grant, and then they pop up and they wake up and they do their scenes. And I just look at that and it's like, it beggars the imagination, because I don't have that much like discipline that I could ever be able to do that. And the thing is, it's artistry, but it's artistry that converts into hard work. And those are the people on the show that survive. And a lot of them are people who are accomplished stage actors, people who really know what it is to do a lot of work, people who come to set prepared, because we put for the money they spend on the show, they spend a decent amount of money on the show, but the show we're making is a lot more ambitious than what we're paying for. And it's because we operate on like maximum efficiency, and that's like all of our crews. We don't go to the Gap and buy outfits. We don't have shoppers. We have a leather master. I've never actually done a show that has a leather master, which is, I guess, what they call them. But he comes in, and he's from French Canada, and he's very stern fellow, and he does all of our leather for our for our various costumes. Everything is made by hand. Everything is and it is this amazing confederacy of really dedicated workaholic artists, and that's for me. That's what works on the show.
Awesome.
Anybody else want to chime in on that same question?
I just want to
I'm
say
actually
that
interested in hearing from you, Brendan, because you have people that come in and sing for you on top
that's
of.
true. That's
You're trying
true.
to get a very specific type of performance out of an actor.
Yeah, I mean, I actually have had the privilege of working with actors on the show, starting in season 3, actually. I don't think I'm going to be spoiling anything, but I went in to train some of these actors to produce them to singing, and none of whom were actual singers. And the thing that I always find so amazing about actors, I envy actors less than musicians. When I always find that I think to myself, what's the hardest art form? And being a musician is pretty tough. It's one of the most expensive hobbies / professions there is in the whole world. But I would take it over, which I am a musician, but I would take it over being an actor any day. It is so hard to put yourself on the line, not just even when the red light is on and you're in front of the camera, but even the auditioning process, even before the auditioning process, like what you have to do to get to the auditioning process is so hard. And then to focus on your craft, to be that person in front of the camera, and then have some kid be like, okay, now sing this song. It really, especially singing, is interesting because singing brings out insecurity in people in ways that very few other things do. I think everyone loves music. Everyone loves singing in the shower and in the car. But when it's in front of other people, it's like, even me, I'm a professional singer. Like, I freak out. You have to go through this. And I worked with 3 or 4 actors thus far this season, all of whom just put their insecurities in the closet and closed the door and did fantastic performances. I think some of it was in English. Also, some of it was also not in English, which is also just a whole nother level of crazy. When it's like you're asking somebody to sing possibly for the first time on national television, and then to do it in this ridiculous alien language which they have no idea how to speak. But I did want to also just add that as far as TV shows are concerned, this is the leather master, the costume designer. They're my favorite people on this show in particular. Just amazing costumes on Defiance.
I just want to add that a significant portion of my job is also directing ADR and directing the principal cast and supporting cast in ADR. And again, that's a trap that I've fallen into for the last 20 years. And it's understandable when someone comes in with some insecurities about, why do I have to re-record this, because I'll never be quite what I was on the day when I was acting opposite my co-star and I was in costume and wardrobe. But oftentimes on especially a science fiction show, it becomes about the rules, or it becomes about addressing a network note, it becomes about rewriting some dialogue off camera. And it's, my favorite actors, I'm there for all of them, and inevitably on every show I've worked on, there's some folks who need a little extra coaxing. And you have to think of the whole. You have to think of the show and the universe and what it is we're trying to do, not your particular performance on the day. Once you get over that, then we work on it. And we work on it, and sometimes you shoot 5 or 20 or 30 takes until everyone's happy and we think we have what we need, and then we move on. But that is a challenge for sure.
Paul, since you have the mic right now, we actually have a question that's come in from YouTube from Mediocre Films. Specifically for you, how can actors make your job easier in post-production?
How can actors make their jobs
Make
easier?
your job easier in post? Is there anything that they can do in terms of
They can
their
speak
contribution?
clearly into their microphone.
You heard it here first.
I've
No,
worked
God
on,
bless that answer. That's me.
I've worked on shows with actors who are like, no, I don't want to play to the microphone. It's not natural. I'm just going to have to. It's like, what was that? What did he say? And inevitably, we're going to be on the mix stage trying to decipher what someone's saying, and so
Speaking English this time,
exactly.
not
And
a
so
Rappian.
you don't it doesn't have to be artificial, but there just has to be some enunciation and some knowledge of where the microphone is and what it is you're doing, or an understanding that you're going to be asked to re-record that later.
Well, to be fair, sometimes they have like a mouthpiece.
That's
and
true.
Thing.
That's true.
Yeah.
No,
False teeth.
yeah. There's prosthetics and all kinds of things that happen on our show, but there is an acting style that I certainly became aware of. post X-Files where there was a kind of a mumbling and a whispering and an ad-libby thing that went on. And it's difficult because inevitably someone's going to say, what in the world are they saying? And I've had situations, not on this show, but other shows where I've had to revoice parts because actors didn't want to come in and say 5 or 10 lines of ADR. And I said, well, we're going to revoice your part because that's how badly we need to understand what your character's saying.
I think there is sort of a hidden baseline skill that's required for being on camera that makes some actors more successful at it than others, about knowing kind of being aware through your peripheral vision of where the camera is, having an idea of where you look good and what you convey from every possible angle, knowing instinctively, I feel the light and I don't have to look for the light. I've got very good spatial awareness and I don't have to look down because you kind of laugh when an actor's doing this is they're looking to find their mark, which is the tape on the ground, and an actor who sort of naturally can sort of memorize how many steps it is without thinking about it and acting at the same time is very helpful. And I think along with what Paul's saying is if you want to convey, hey, yeah, I don't want to do that, like, being able to do that in a loud enough voice that it creates the illusion that you're mumbling, but you're actually giving enough to be able to have the production track be what goes in the final episode and not have to go in and loop it, because looping rarely sounds as good as your natural voice. And that's kind of like, being on stage. Like, even if you're having an intimate, quiet scene, you need to remember to cheat yourself out. You need to put enough, use your diaphragm enough to like send the words out there. And there is, sometimes people get a little too naturalistic in their approach on camera, and it's more subtle than stage, but it is definitely an acquired, learnable skill.
Awesome. What's that? Yeah, we've got a couple great questions here. This one comes from Michael for the entire panel. Is Michael Ganadri in the house? Hey, Michael, thanks for the question. So Michael asks, over the years, many showrunners have fought to avoid the label science fiction. Do you guys feel a similar burden to avoid that label?
We're on the Sci-Fi Network.
I figured.
I guess it would be a little douchey to sort of dodge that label.
Although they changed their name.
They did, yes.
They sort of rebranded themselves, I think, which was sort of on this because of this, right? Didn't they? I don't know. They went from being sci-fi to SYFY.
You can't trademark the generic term science fiction, but if it has a Y in it, then it's trademarked.
So it's one of those startup names where you just add a Y where there should be
a Y or an R. Yeah. I wonder if maybe the sort of spirit of the question was, are there negative connotations that come with the label of science fiction, and is that too limiting to some people?
It used to be at one point. I think right now some of the most successful television shows and some of the most successful film franchises are speculative fiction, which is just a fancier word for science fiction. Certainly the advantage that science fiction has is it has an extremely, extremely engaged fan base. Like, people get really, really passionate about their science fiction. They take that shit really, really seriously. And that's the kind of person you want watching your show, because you want someone that's going to follow you. When you flip, when you're programmed on a different night every season, you want to know that your audience is going to follow you. You want to know that your audience is technically savvy enough to track you down wherever it is you happen to end up, and that's science fiction. I know that if a member of the Sci-Fi Network were here on this panel, Michael, who's our promotion whiz at Sci-Fi, he would say that Sci-Fi audience is comprised largely of what they call igniters, who are the people that they blog, they log onto social media, they set trends, they establish what is cool and what is not cool to enjoy, and they're a very desirable fan base. So if you're on ABC or one of the broadcast networks, being called a genre show or a science fiction show limits your audience because you broadcast, but on basic cable you narrowcast. Like there's a huge cultural impact that's been made by a show like Better Call Saul, but I think if you actually look at the ratings, like it's not, they're a fraction of, it would be canceled if it were on broadcast television. But the people who enjoy that show are a very special targeted demographic, which makes it a very attractive show. And I think the same thing for, for audiences of science fiction and what they call genre shows.
I want to add that, science fiction traditionally, good science fiction really explores politics and news and current topics and things like that in a way that's, a metaphor for what we're going through now. So there's a wide range, obviously, of programming on Sci-Fi Channel, and I do still get to actually select what I will work on for them. And when I see scripts as smart as Defiance, I'm all in. But, there's other stuff that I consider more kind of drive-in movies, and there's a place and a time for that, but it's not something I'd want to spend a lot of time working on.
Since we're talking about, I don't know what you would call it, niche audiences or whatever, this is almost, I feel like, a good time to loop back to the video game thing, because you have, I have so many questions about this whole marriage between the show and the video game. First of all, we talked about earlier, it's like the first time ever where a video game has informed a show and vice versa. Do they have numbers on, are people playing the video game and watching the show? Or do you have separate audiences for the two? Are people paying close attention to the crossovers? Darren, do you and Todd write for the video game? Like, what's the relationship like between the two mediums?
You're asking very intelligent questions that I myself have asked in the past, and the answer is no. Curiously, there is no metric for the Venn diagram intersection between people who are, you remember that from like statistics, where you've got these are people watching the TV show, this is people who are playing the game, and then the wedge in the middle of the people that are doing both. There is no metric to know who is doing both, and nobody cared to spend the money to find out for whatever reasons that elude me. In terms of the other part of it, which was the crossover, is we learned something very very interesting, and I think that a lot of what we've learned on Defiance is going to be probably this experience will be very instructive the next time I go to run a show that is a transmedia extravaganza, because we learned a lot about what works and what does not work. And one of the challenges was technology at this point is advancing so quickly that, given the lead time that is required to cross over a television show which shoots really quickly. Like a television show, we have generally 7-day shoots. So a director shows up 7 days before the episode begins shooting, and that's when the episode is really solidified as to what it's going to be and what we can afford for it to be. And then that episode is shot in 7 days, and boom, the director's gone, and then we're dealing with footage, and the footage that we have is a fixed quantity of stuff that has to be made into an episode. An MMO video game is constantly changing, and it has to be planned a long, long time in advance, and sometimes they'll spend months and months planning something, and then they'll realize, oh, it slowed down our servers. Crap, what are we going to do about that? And what we discovered when the Tryon game launched was we had a lot of very, very elaborate crossovers planned, but as the game was going along, that it suddenly became that you couldn't. Originally, the game was just going to come out on PC. And then they discovered, oh, well, it wouldn't be competitive in the marketplace unless it was also available for the console games. So they had to add the console games. Now, the problem with that is you can't make the same game for all 3 iterations. So they were making the version for the Xbox, the version for the PS3, and the version for the PC. That took up a lot of money, took up a lot of resources, and what we gradually discovered was a lot of the agreed upon crossovers we were setting up in the television show, which had shot and long since wrapped, months before, and those were not able to be followed up in the video game and vice versa. So what we started doing was we started creating because we shot many months before the actual video game stuff would go live, is we started building in Chinese menus of available options for the people who did the game. So, for example, we said, okay, we have a character, Kenya, played by Mia Kirshner, and she's going to be we created like a robot artificial version of her that did 2 episodes and left in season 2. You're welcome to take her and spin her off and do something with her if you wish, because you now can take that character, who is a big, very beloved character in our show. We would say, hey, we're bringing the character from the video game Varys, who is a crime lord. He's gonna come into the show, and he's gonna have an interaction with Nolan. If you want to follow up on that, here are some ideas for what you can possibly follow up on. And on the first page of every script, we would have like a list of potential crossovers, and those would be approved by the network, and those would go to Tryon. And to be honest, I haven't checked in with the game in a while, so I'm not sure how many they've done. But I think the other thing that I would do differently if I were doing this again would be to put one creative entity in charge of both the television side and the game side, with an equal equity in both parts of it. Because on the television show, our first priority was to make sure that we had a good TV show and that it got picked up by Sci-Fi. The game's priority was to make sure that the game was working smoothly and that they were attracting people and they were coming up with a business model that kept them in business. And there was no overarching mastermind making sure that the multimedia franchise was in operation. So it was a challenge for a lot of those reasons. And I think that I think the transmedia nature of it was successful, and it was innovative, and we did a lot of things really, really well. There's a lot of things that I think we could have done, we could have done better.
But it's evolving still. It's
still evolving, and it's still there. It's just it's not as ambitious as it was when we first launched.
Did you say that Xbox, PlayStation, and PC are all different?
They're the same essential game, but to make it work on each platform, you have to deal with it differently. Like, for example, the PC, and again, I'm a little bit out of my element, so I apologize if anything I'm saying is inaccurate, but the PC has a lot more computing power. So you have to kind of dumb down the PC version of the game in terms of resources to make sure that it looks of a piece with the game that's on the 2 consoles, because they don't have the same computing power.
Okay.
And that means that you have to, when you're looking at, okay, how are you rendering and what are you doing and what are your games and how long does it take to download your patches, all these things that I don't really know a lot about. All of that has to be factored in, and it becomes just a lot more time intensive, because people in your company have to be monitoring all that stuff and then keeping it up to date with current patches.
Wow. So the way you tell it then, except for maybe characters that Darren is creating with you and the rest of the writers, no one has direct sort of, you're not working on the video games, Brennan, Paul, okay.
We did used to have weekly conference calls, and this preceded the production of the pilot. Brainstorming sessions with the game people about potential opportunities from the game to the show, and vice versa.
Wow, that just sounds so like a handful to have all of that going on all at once. But very cool. So another question we have. This comes from Aaron. Aaron, are you in the house? Aaron Braxton. Hey, Aaron. So Aaron asks, what advice would you give to aspiring writers who want to break into the industry without representation or industry referrals?
Get a camera, shoot your thing, and put it online. That's probably what I would do.
Wow. Darren, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think one thing that I tend to tell people is to not worry so much about the networking and the meeting people, and to concentrate 90% of your energy and time on the writing part of it, because we live in LA, and your next door neighbor's cousin is probably an agent or whatever. So if your stuff is good, it's going to reach the audience, because we, for those of, I'm talking to the live audience here. And for those of you who are listening to the podcast who are anywhere else, you're an email away from somebody. And if your stuff is really phenomenal, everybody who is trying to find the next great writer really wants to find them. So the fantastic work does find an audience, and so I think that's my big message, is to really concentrate all your energy on the work, and put energy into the networking and the finding the agents and all that stuff, but most of it on the work.
Awesome. Awesome. Cool.
Darren, just tangentially on the same topic, why is it that you and Todd work as a team, as opposed to you working alone or him working alone?
That's a really good question. We go way back, way back. We were friends in junior high school, so it's a very unique sort of writing partnership. And sometimes writers will say, "Do you recommend being in a writing partnership?" And I have to say honestly, my writing partnership is very unique because we're really old buddies and we go way back. And so try it. I think we were in a band.
Like, come on, that's awesome.
We were roommates for a while. During college, after college, and we started writing together. And in features, being writing partners is a little bit more organic than it is in television. But we've always been writing partners, and it's just sort of what we've done in our professional career for a couple of decades. So, that's what we do. I don't know if I answered the question exactly, but that. He was writing, and I wasn't a writer at the time. I was a musician, and he came to me, and there was an idea he was working on, and he's like, "Oh yeah, you had some ideas for this," and the next thing we knew, we were writing a script together, and so that's how it happened.
Sounds like you.
Me?
Yeah, a musician who is aspiring to get into writing. I don't know.
Oh, shucks.
You're welcome.
Awesome. Did you have another one you want to do?
Yeah, I guess this could be for anyone. This comes from Mark Vashro on Twitter. I guess any one of you or all of you could answer this question because it might have some good stories, although you told the story of the season 3 premiere. Favorite actor contribution and how it changed the production, affected production. They didn't die in the snow.
Early on, this is going to be about Jamie Murray, Tony Curran, and Jesse Rath, who they're sort of the nuclear family on our show. They're Castathans, which are the white-skinned aliens, and they come from a very odd, from human standards, culture in which family baths are something that you do all the time, that generally the marriages are open. Everyone, from what we've seen on the show, is omnisexual. There's very, sort of one of the things I really love about Defiance is the idea that any sort of gender discrepancy is noteworthy, is kind of an antiquated notion. Like really, whether guys are attracted to guys, girls are attracted to girls, or any combination of the two, it's just kind of irrelevant on the show, which I think it makes it actually a little utopian. But early on, I think this was our second episode of the show, we were trying to establish what the dynamics were, and I really liked the idea of the Castathans having a relationship that would be very creepy and weird and peculiar to the viewing audience, but that was very honest and natural to them because our Earth 2013 audience viewing the show, 2012, whenever it aired, was looking at things from a very different perspective, and to always be reminding them that these are aliens. So it was a scene in the bathtub, and it was Daytak and Stama, who are the mom and the dad, in the tub having a conversation, and their son has just had his heart broken by his human girlfriend, and mom gets out of the tub. Now, Castathan women wear this bathing attire, which is this incredibly skimpy sort of glued-on beads that is probably more revealing than a bathing suit because you pretty much look naked. And she kind of gets out and she comforts her son by giving him a big hug and a kiss and hugging him. And it's the weird notion of seeing this naked, beautiful woman embracing her son and holding it just gave everyone the willies. And at the network, they just kind of, they were very disturbed by it. And they were like, we can't do that. And I said, well, why can't they? They're alien. It's because that's disgusting. It's incestuous. What are we saying here? Well, we're saying that it's aliens. And
Racist.
Mark Stern, who was our boss, he was like, yeah, I buy that. I think it's cool. And then, but that was sort of like the first big battle of propriety that we won on the show, and from that point on, any idea of what are taboos kind of went out the window, and that really was because Jamie Murray and Jesse Rath, who were in the embrace, they were so brave and they were so committed, and they played the moment so honestly and not creepy and sexual. And Tony Curran, just there was a point where he was sitting in the bath, naked in his bath, kind of looking up at his wife hugging the son. And he just had this kind of fathers know best kind of like, I've got a good family kind of like satisfied smile on his face, which was utterly weird and unnerving and mind-blowing, but it worked in the moment because they approached that really peculiar thing with incredible truth and honesty and integrity as artists, and it made the whole thing work, and it showed the network what the show could do in terms of holding up a mirror to cultures and what we find right, wrong, or indifferent.
I remember that scene, and I remember being like, this is weird. Like Jamie Murray, first of all, doesn't look old enough to be that kid's mom. But also, it was kind of like a little awkward to watch. And when you he cut to the father in the bath, just kind of like smugly being like, that's my boy, it was kind of awkward. But the cool thing about science fiction shows is that you can get away with that stuff, and you can sort of trigger in your viewer that reaction to sort of question, why is that weird? Like, really, why is that weird?
Yeah, that's exactly
fun,
the purpose. And anything good speculative fiction can have characters behave in ways that you look at and you question, and then you can sort of look at, oh wait, do we do that in our actual world? And you can make statements that you couldn't possibly say if you were talking about Israel and Palestine, if you were talking about black and white, if you were talking about Irish Catholics and Protestants, Sunni and Shia, like you can talk about those things without actually talking about them because you're putting them into this alien context. And that's one of the things, going back to the science fiction question, one of the things I really love about doing science fiction is the fact that you can really get into those things in a real way.
Yeah, totally.
We unfortunately have to wrap it up. We're running out of time. Obviously, we could sit and talk about how to make a TV show for days. I would love to end on this note, unless you have any other ideas, because I didn't run this by you. And we're partners. Me and you, buddy. I would like to just go down the line and just in a couple of sentences hear from each of you, what is the favorite part? What is your favorite part of your job? Favorite thing about your job?
My favorite thing about my job is I have one. Bada bing! And B, it's extremely enriching. It's very challenging. I get to push myself as a songwriter, as a producer, as a performer on almost every track. And I find that as a collaborator, as we've mentioned many times, how fun it is to workshop and woodshed things with everyone on the show. But Kevin's just awesome to work with. I'll pitch him some wacky idea. He'll say, run with it. Maybe there'll be some revisions. A lot of times last season, it was just this golden, we'd be like, hey, I'm going to write this wacky country song, or I'm going to write this wacky electro trap hip hop song. And he'd be like, this is awesome. And it's just like a very friendly, fun working atmosphere, and ultimately the show is so unique for all the reasons aforementioned before, and it's just extremely rewarding, and just being a songwriter on a show at all is just, I can count that on one hand the number of times that's happened in the history of film and television. But yes, having a job, getting to write cool songs and hang out with cool, fun people is that's my favorite thing about the show.
Supervising the final audio mix is exhilarating and never gets old because it really represents everyone's work finally coming together and being the final product that you air, and that's a blast. And it's still an opportunity to kind of get in the sandbox with everyone and discuss new ideas, and it's amazing how much invention actually takes place on the mix stage. And Kevin will like a song, a cover song. There was this awesome, the Four Non-Blondes, What's Up? Last season that Kevin loved so much that he decided to take it straight all the way through the main title. Just replace the main title theme with an extra 15 seconds of this song. And the music editor got to work, and a few minutes later we had something that was really unique and great. And so it's exciting. It's cool.
Yeah. For me, aside from working with a lot of really fantastic people, this show is an opportunity to, talk about, as Kevin had mentioned, topics that you don't normally get to talk about, and Todd and I haven't really had as much of an opportunity to write about, but big ideas like, why is humanity, why do we have such a propensity for violence, or, what is, religious concepts and, devotion to parents and how far that should go, and what are we willing to do for our loved ones, and do the ends justify the means, and these sort of like big, navel-gazy sort of topics, mixed in with an action adventure show with people dressed up as aliens, like that's like a dream come true, and I'm really, grateful to have had the opportunity to do that.
I guess for me, I'm in a unique situation on the show because I'm the only person, along with my assistant Amanda Albert, who's there for all of the show. Like, I'm there before the writers are hired. I'm there pitching to the network. I'm there throughout the writing process because of the people here. Like, Paul doesn't actually clock in until we've begun production and have dailies. He's free to be doing other jobs. Brendan, the same thing. Darren and Todd, they're there from the very beginning with me, but then once the show wraps, like we've now wrapped photography on season 3, and they've gone on, and they're no longer on the season 3 Defiance clock. But I stay on until the bitter end. And one of the things that I love the most, and I spend a lot of time in Toronto, which is a whole other different bunch of artists, and I love sharing the work of one of our groups of artists with the other ones, because it is such a pleasure to do a screening for our crew and our cast and all the people that were freezing their nuts off in Toronto when they see what these guys have done with post-production and what the music sounds like and what the visual effects and the color correction, what the finished show looks like. It was never what they were imagining, and just saying like, look what our artists here in Los Angeles have done. And having our writers looking at what we've written and what we put on the page when we see dailies for the first time, and just all of the and doing the spotting sessions, because what I love about having Brendan and his brother and Daniel Coleman and Jeff, our sound guys, and Ren, our music editor, is they're our first audience. They watch our first assemblies, and they're the first time that I get to see smart, cool nerds watching the show. And I get to see if it works or not. And when something really works, and if I can make like Brendan and Bear jump out of their seats and go, "Motherfucker, oh no!"
Those words have never come out of my mouth.
Like Paul and I are doing like little high fives because we're and we'll always like when we know that a big thing is coming or a death or something really shocking, we'll both sort of lean and be looking to see what their reactions are, and just that whole sharing of the process with all the different people in this big giant monolithic Leviathan thing that's the show. I love being there to see all of it and share it with everyone else.
That's beautiful. Whew. That's
awesome.
That's a hell of a note to end on.
Yeah, seriously. Wow. Well, thank you so much, guys. Really, really appreciate your time.
It was a pleasure.
Yeah.
Excellent questions. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming, and for all the viewers watching at home. I'm not even really sure where that camera is, but thank you for tuning into the live stream. The actual episode will be published on our feed next Tuesday, and we will see you all at the after party. Come find one of us if you don't know where that is or what it's all about. Thank you, guys.
Boom.